back. We are following breaking news. You can see President Trump's motorcade making its way in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, to that historic summit. President Trump set to meet with world leaders in Egypt this morning to discuss what he hopes will be a lasting peace between Israel and Gaza. That meeting comes as key challenges still remain in Trump's 20-point peace plan as Israeli hostages return home for the first time in more than 2 years. Back with us now, MSNBC White House correspondent Akayla Gardner. And Akayla, how significant is it to see all of these world leaders, Arab states, Muslim nations, European countries, the Palestinian Authority, and the U.S. all coming together for this summit?
Well, it's hugely significant, especially because there's major looming questions about what the future of Gaza looks like. President Trump has been asked about his opinion of a two-state solution, and he's really punted that question and said it's going to be up to negotiations, many of which will happen today. We do know there is a temporary board of peace that is being set up, chaired by President Trump. Another member on that will be former Prime Minister to Britain, Tony Blair. But there's questions about who else will sit on that board, and I assume many of the leaders that he's meeting with today could eventually sit on that council. There's also going to be a Palestinian committee, an apolitical committee that board will oversee. There's also major questions about a peacekeeping force that President Trump hopes to set up. There's questions about who will fund it, which countries will actually provide forces for that, and questions about whether Hamas will actually disarm. There is some thought that they could destroy offensive weapons, but whether it will be all of their weaponry is still a major question, and certainly some of those conversations are going to be happening today.
They certainly will. Akayla Gardner, thank you so much for your reporting. And joining us now, former Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama, Ben Rhodes. He is an MSNBC political and national security analyst, and Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. He is an MSNBC political analyst as well. And Peter, you and I were on the air together when Hamas announced that it would release the 20 remaining living Israeli hostages. Fast forward to the events that we're seeing today. They are now back on Israeli soil. What do you believe about Trump's foreign policy style move the needle forward like this?
Well, look, he has an advantage over other presidents in the fact that Netanyahu depends so heavily on Trump, and that has made Trump his, most important ally. So when Trump actually decides to weigh in a way that other presidents have tried but not always been able to succeed, Netanyahu has less room for maneuver. So, in fact, Trump was able to accomplish something here that's significant, hugely significant. It is worth still remembering, of course, that it is just a ceasefire. And for the moment, of course, we've had multiple ceasefires over the years. Multiple presidents have negotiated ceasefires. President Biden negotiated 2 ceasefires in this particular war. The question is whether the momentum that we see today, and there does feel like this, optimism in the region at the moment, can be translated into something more enduring. That's the harder task, right? These hostages are free. Israelis are thrilled. The Palestinians who have been released are being greeted jubilantly in Palestinian territories. But the harder questions still remain. Where does this go from here?
And Ben, the latest edition of The Economist says, quote, the peace deal is a triumph for Mr. Trump's transactional bullying style of diplomacy. Trump has employed his own art of the deal, peace through strength tactics here, helping Israel strike Iran while lambasting Bibi for striking Qatar, making him apologize, pressuring him to agree to end this war. What do you make of this, at least temporary success and shift in foreign policy? Do you believe that this can help Trump get over the finish line in the 20-point plan?
I would echo what Peter said in the sense that I give Trump credit for essentially finally applying some leverage on the Israeli government, on Bibi Netanyahu in particular, in a way that, frankly, we didn't even see President Biden do when he was in office. And I think simultaneously, Qatar and Turkey were applying a lot of leverage on Hamas, and then that got us into this ceasefire. That's terrific. It's great that the Israeli hostages are reunited with their families, that aid is getting to Gaza. I would not go as far as to say that this kind of validates a certain, theory of diplomacy, because frankly, it's just a ceasefire. The problem has not been solved. It's not really a peace deal in the sense that we still don't know who's going to govern Gaza. We still don't know if Hamas is going to disarm. We're at phase 1, quite literally, of what would be a very long road to some kind of lasting peace. So, look, I think a transactional, and it's interesting to reflect on that quote you put up. I mean, a transactional style of diplomacy it can get you that kind of short-term win, right? You take care of a piece of business, but it's not necessarily designed for the kind of patient follow-through and painstaking work that is necessary to address something as deep as the conflict between the Israelis and Palestinians.
And you took those painstaking steps to try to engage with Iran on a nuclear deal. President Trump specifically blasted the JCPOA, that nuclear agreement that you helped forge with the Biden administration. Trump withdrew from it. He also mentioned wanting Iran to come back to the table for peace during his speech to the Israeli parliament. Let's listen to that.
This was a disaster for Israel, and it was a disaster for everyone. And I remember that Bibi Netanyahu came to the United States and worked so hard to try and get Obama not to do that deal. The Iran nuclear deal turned out to be a disaster. And by the way, I terminated the Iran nuclear deal, and I was very proud to do it. Yet even to Iran, whose regime has inflicted so much death on the Middle East, the hand of friendship and cooperation is open. I'm telling you, they want to make a deal.
So ultimately, I think we're talking about carrot and stick here. Did the use of force against Iran's nuclear capabilities lead to a changing dynamic in the region? And do you see a path where Iran actually comes back to the table because it is so cowed by what has happened?
Well, again, this is another good example of how you can do something that has a short-term impact, but it doesn't solve the long-term problem. I mean, look, the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, had permanent prohibitions on Iran getting a nuclear weapon, had 10 to 15-year restrictions on their nuclear program. Trump's strike on Iran set their nuclear program back, based on the estimates that have leaked out, maybe a few months, right? And so that accomplished a few months setback for the Iranians, but the only way to have a lasting guarantee that they're not going to develop the nuclear weapon is a nuclear deal. So there too, I think we see, you're kind of putting a lid on a problem, but you're not solving it, right? And look, I would support if he was able to negotiate that kind of lasting restriction on the Iranian nuclear program. That would be great. But the reality is, under a diplomatic agreement, they were shipping all their nuclear fuel out of the country. There were inspectors all over their facilities. Now that's not the case. And so, again, he likes the pageantry, he likes the optics, but it takes kind of sustained attention to actually get these things done. And look, I don't think that I really don't see a correlation between the U.S. bombing the Iranian nuclear program and this deal. I think this deal was because of the leverage they applied on the Israeli government. It is the case that Iran's proxies across the region are set back significantly. And the question is, can that lead to a changed dynamic, not just in the Palestinian territories, but in places like Lebanon and Iraq? Again, that too is going to require the kind of leaders that are meeting today to stay on this and to really work through some really complicated and difficult issues for a long time to come here.
Peter, to Ben's point about, the president needing discipline here and to pay close attention and continue the pressure, you've told me that Trump can take his eye off the prize in scenarios. He can lose focus. How committed do you think that the president is in this moment to this full lasting peace and all of the implications and the work it will take to get there?
Yeah, patience has never been a word associated with Donald Trump for very much in terms of diplomacy. No question about that. He tends to, as you rightly said, get interested in something and then lose interest in something and maybe get interested in again. So we'll see. At the same time, he has a vested interest at this point in making this last. If he wants to win that Nobel Peace Prize, which he seems to covet so much, if he wants to make a mark in history, which seems to matter to him as it does to many presidents, then he's going to have to, apply more sustained interest and pleasure and pressure to get something that will last. Otherwise, 3 years from now, when he leaves office, it may not look as positive as it does right now. So that's, Ben makes that point. The diplomacy is not easy. It's not quick. And it does require patience. That's not been his strength, but he has a vested interest here.
And we've not seen such an unprecedented stage for President Trump to get out of the beast as we have in Sharm el-Sheikh, where he is going to engage in those diplomatic efforts. We'll see how long they last. Ben Rhodes and Peter Baker, thank you both so much for your analysis. We appreciate it.